You may be able to explain every wound, identify every trigger, and state every boundary with remarkable precision, and still become frightened, punishing, or unreachable the moment someone gets close enough to affect you. This is the contradiction few people want to face. The wound can learn the language of healing without surrendering its control over behavior. You know the pattern. Someone offers difficult feedback. Perhaps their words are imperfect, their timing clumsy, their own emotion mixed into the message. Before you can become curious about what they experienced, your body tightens, your chest hardens, your attention narrows, and then the language arrives. You explain your attachment pattern, you identify their projection, you describe the dynamic, clarify your intention, invoke your boundary, perhaps even name the nervous system response unfolding between you. Everything you say may contain truth, yet the truth is being used to prevent a more vulnerable truth from entering the room. You feel exposed, you may have caused pain, you do not know how to remain present without losing the image of yourself as conscious, safe, and healed. This is where psychological fluency becomes ambiguous. It can illuminate experience, or it can organize a defense. It can deepen contact with reality, or help you rise above the one reality you cannot yet tolerate. Not because the insight is false, but because its function has changed. Understanding has stepped in before tenderness. Explanation has arrived before accountability. Language has protected you from being touched. Insight allows you to observe the pattern from a safe distance. Integration changes what you do while the pattern has hold of you. Insight says, I understand why I withdraw. Integration notices the impulse to disappear, tells the truth about it, protects what genuinely needs protecting, and still takes responsibility for the impact of leaving. One gives you a map of your inner world. The other changes how you travel through it with another person. This is not an argument against therapy, boundaries, self-knowledge, or spiritual understanding. These can be essential instruments of freedom. The question is whether they are helping you meet reality or helping you preserve an admired identity. Are they making you more available to truth, consent, grief, repair, and change? Or are they allowing you to remain faithful to the old pattern while feeling that you have transcended it? That question may create unease. Let it. Unease is not proof that your growth was fraudulent. Your knowledge may be real and still incomplete. Your boundaries may be necessary and still sometimes recruited by fear. Your spiritual understanding may be sincere and still unable to metabolize the emotion beneath it. What matters now is not whether you can describe yourself beautifully. It is what that description enables when closeness becomes difficult. We are going to uncover what the healed persona protects beneath its composure, how it reveals itself in relationship, and how knowledge becomes repair, follow-through, and observable change. But first, we must understand why appearing healed can feel so necessary, because the mask was not originally vanity, it was shelter. To understand this shelter, you need a more generous lens than hypocrisy. Think of the persona as the face through which you become workable in the world, selective, organized, socially legible. It is not necessarily a lie. It may express your real intelligence, discipline, compassion, and self-awareness. But it can also conceal experiences that do not yet feel safe enough to belong to the person you believe yourself to be. Perhaps there was a time when confusion carried humiliation, when needing someone placed too much power in their hands, or when emotional unpredictability threatened whatever stability you had. This is not everyone's history, but where such conditions existed, composure could become more than a preference. It could become dignity. If you could understand what was happening, name it correctly, and remain calm, then perhaps you would never again be at the mercy of what you felt. And it worked. You found language for experiences that had once been chaos. You entered therapy, recognized harmful patterns, created distance from what injured you, and learned that pain could be observed without swallowing your entire identity. These were not imaginary achievements. They may have saved your relationships, your direction, even your capacity to hope. The problem is not that none of it was real. The problem is that real growth became arranged around one remaining prohibition. You must never be seen without control. The world often rewards this arrangement. People seek your advice because you can make sense of their confusion. They admire your calm because they do not witness what calm is required to contain. They bring you their needs and assume that someone who can articulate dependence so beautifully must have transcended dependence altogether. Soon, your usefulness confirms your identity. You become the steady one, the discerning one, the person who has already done the work. Then a quiet bargain takes hold. I may examine my pain, provided I never appear helpless within it. I may speak about contradiction, provided no one sees me contradict myself. I may honor need in others, provided I am never experienced as needy. I may acknowledge mistakes in principle, provided I am not caught being wrong in a way I cannot immediately explain. This is why attacking the healed persona only strengthens it. Accusation sounds like the return of the very humiliation it was built to prevent. What it needs first is recognition. You did not create this identity merely to impress others. You created coherence where there had been disorganization. You made a life from capacities that were genuinely yours. Yet a mask does not need to be false in every respect to become defensive. It becomes defensive when only those forms of healing that preserve control are permitted to enter conscious identity. Sincerity and avoidance can therefore coexist. You may fully believe the composed version of yourself because everything that contradicts it has been kept outside the frame. And once that happens, insight becomes the mask's most refined instrument, not because it tells lies, but because it can tell the truth in a way that prevents anything from changing. The danger is not that you misunderstand yourself. The danger is that you understand yourself so quickly that no new experience can reach you. One kind of insight opens contact. It helps you stay with discomfort long enough to discover something you did not already know. The other closes contact. It assigns every feeling a cause, every reaction a category, every conflict a familiar pattern. Nothing uncertain remains, and therefore nothing can transform you. The first alibi appears when naming a trigger is treated as an exemption from responsibility. You felt abandoned, so you withdrew. You felt criticized, so contempt entered your voice. You felt unsafe, so you accused before asking. The trigger matters. It gives context to the intensity of your reaction and may reveal what requires care. But context is not absolution. Your pain can explain why you acted as you did without erasing what your action created for someone else. The second alibi is intention. After hurting another person, you defend what you meant rather than becoming curious about what occurred. You meant to be honest. You meant to protect yourself. You meant to prevent escalation. All of this may be true, yet intention describes your internal aim. It does not determine another person's experience. If your goodness must be established before their pain can be heard, then your explanation is protecting identity, not relationship. The third alibi is subtler because it resembles accountability. You narrate the pattern with extraordinary accuracy. You describe how closeness activates fear, how fear produces distance, how distance allows you to regain control. The account is flawless. You feel relief because recognition itself feels like movement. The other person may even comfort you for how courageously you understand your wound. But there is no unqualified apology, no changed response, no interruption of the sequence when it returns. This is how self-awareness can decorate repetition. You can say, I know I shut down because intimacy overwhelms me, and still leave the other person carrying the same silence. You can explain why tenderness became unavailable without acknowledging that it became unavailable. You can reveal the machinery of the pattern while continuing to make someone else live beneath it. So use a simpler test. After the insight is spoken, is there more contact? Is there more responsibility? Is there more choice? Can you hear impact without immediately correcting it? Can you apologize without inserting a defense? Can you identify one behavior that will be different when the pattern appears again? If not, you may possess a sophisticated account of why nothing can change. Interpretation is not the enemy. It can be the beginning of compassion, precision, and freedom. But it remains a beginning. It serves healing when it deepens inquiry and enlarges your capacity to respond. It becomes an alibi at the exact point where it replaces responsibility for impact. And when explanation alone can no longer protect the pattern, the defense often seeks greater authority. It stops saying, "This is why I reacted," and begins saying, "This is my boundary." A boundary deserves more respect than the defense that sometimes borrows its name. At its healthiest, it clarifies where your consent ends, what you will participate in, and what action you will take when participation becomes harmful. It does not require permission from another person. It protects your agency precisely because it names what belongs to you, your presence, your body, your time, your availability. But the same language can conceal a different function. A boundary becomes a fortress when it is organized not around safety, but around immunity. Immunity from discomfort, contradiction, memory, or another person's pain. Then, the limit does more than protect your participation. It attempts to govern the entire encounter before a shared reality can emerge. Notice the difference between saying, "If insults continue, I will end this conversation," and saying, "You are not allowed to feel angry with me." One names your action in response to conduct. The other claims authority over another person's inner life. The disguised demand may forbid them to question your account, remember the event differently, request clarification, or express an impact that unsettles your preferred image of yourself. It sounds decisive. It may even sound therapeutic, yet its hidden command is simple. You may remain near me only if your reality does not disturb mine. No single test can judge every limit, but 4 qualities can help you examine its function. First, timing. Did the boundary arise after an honest attempt to understand what was happening, or did it appear the instant discomfort threatened your composure? Second, proportionality. Does the response fit the actual danger, or does disagreement immediately result in total exclusion? Third, reciprocity. Are both people permitted needs, limits, and interpretations, or does only one person's distress carry authority? Fourth, revisability. Can the limit be examined when conditions change, or must questioning it be treated as proof that it was necessary? Firmness does not require rigidity. A protective limit may remain non-negotiable and still be understood honestly. Imagine receiving difficult feedback and announcing that the conversation violates your peace. You leave before naming the injury being discussed. Perhaps a pause is genuinely necessary, but if peace consistently means freedom from being confronted, withdrawal has acquired moral status. The other person is left with the original harm and a second message. Raising it is itself the violation. This does not mean anyone owes unlimited access. Accountability does not require enduring intimidation, coercion, repeated degradation, or unsafe proximity. You may refuse contact. You may decline reconciliation. You may protect yourself without proving the danger to someone committed to denying it. Repair cannot be forced, and consent is not the price of appearing mature. The deeper question is functional. Does this limit preserve dignity while making honest relationship possible, or preserve innocence by making contradiction impossible? A boundary protects your right to choose. A fortress protects the healed identity from being affected. And when withdrawal no longer wishes merely to appear healthy, it may seek an even higher justification. It may begin to appear enlightened, rising into acceptance, detachment, and serenity before grief, anger, and responsibility have been consciously lived. Here, the mask becomes almost untouchable. It no longer speaks only in the language of triggers and limits. It speaks of acceptance, detachment, alignment, forgiveness, and the protection of energy. Its voice is calm. Its conclusions are elevated. Yet beneath that serenity, grief may still be directing choices, anger may still be withholding tenderness, and shame may still be deciding which truths can be admitted. The attraction is understandable. Spiritual perspective can sustain you when ordinary experience feels chaotic, humiliating, or impossible to bear. Meaning can prevent suffering from becoming meaningless. Practice can create space around emotion so that you are not entirely governed by it. There is nothing false about this support. But support becomes escape when the larger meaning is used to avoid the immediate reality. Then grief is dismissed as attachment. Anger becomes evidence of low consciousness. Conflict is renamed bad energy. Accountability is treated as an invitation to betray your inner peace. Instead of asking what the feeling contains, you judge yourself for having it. Instead of hearing what another person is saying, you translate their protest into a lesson about their inability to let go. This is the spiritual form of the healed persona. It does not deny that pain exists. It simply moves above pain so quickly that no one is permitted to encounter it. And here the decisive distinction appears. Known attachment is not non-participation. Known attachment releases the fantasy that you can control another person, guarantee reconciliation, or force a particular outcome. Non-participation refuses the discomfort of showing up at all. One can listen without demanding resolution. The other calls listening unnecessary. One can grieve what cannot be repaired. The other declares the loss complete before sorrow has moved through the body. One can apologize without controlling whether forgiveness follows. The other offers forgiveness as a concept while avoiding the need to ask for it. The relational cost is profound. The person before you cannot meet a human being because every concrete experience is converted into abstraction. Their hurt becomes a mirror. Their anger becomes a vibration. Their request becomes a test of your alignment. Before the meaning of their words reaches you, it has already been lifted into a teaching. They are not heard, they are interpreted. The order matters. First, name what happened without decorating it. Then allow the unwanted feeling, grief, anger, fear, shame to exist without making it a spiritual failure. Hear the impact that belongs to the other person. Decide what responsibility genuinely belongs to you. Only then ask what larger meaning may be found. Meaning discovered after contact can deepen reality. Meaning imposed before contact replaces it. Humility is the threshold. A spiritual perspective is not integrated because it can speak beautifully about wholeness. It is integrated when it can remain present while you are ordinary, reactive, ashamed, uncertain, or in need of forgiveness. True serenity does not require you to transcend your humanity before anyone can reach you. And when that performance of peace can no longer hold, what waits beneath it is not proof that healing failed. It is the disowned emotional life healing still requires, the anger, need, jealousy, dependence, and contradiction that the serene identity refused to call its own. This is where the shadow becomes useful, not as a verdict, and not as proof that every conflict conceals the same forbidden motive. In a Jungian sense, the shadow offers a lens for seeing qualities that conscious identity cannot accept as its own. What is excluded does not cease to influence you. It simply acts without being recognized as yours. For the healed persona, the forbidden qualities are painfully ordinary. Neediness, envy, possessiveness, confusion, resentment, dependency, the wish to be chosen, the longing to be reassured. These experiences threaten an identity built around composure and self-sufficiency, so they are not admitted directly, they return disguised. Need appears as moral judgment of those who do not give enough. Envy becomes a diagnosis of someone else's vanity. Anger freezes into detachment. Control calls itself standards. Fear presents itself as superior discernment. The feeling has not vanished. It has acquired a form that allows the conscious self to remain innocent of having it. This split does not make either side evil. The composed self is protecting dignity, continuity, and the hard-won capacity not to be overwhelmed. The rejected self is carrying something equally important: unmet need, corrective anger, desire, grief, and information about where your actual limits may be. One side fears chaos, the other refuses disappearance. Integration begins when neither must destroy the other in order to exist. Sometimes the mirror appears through contempt. A quality in another person provokes an intensity greater than the immediate situation seems to explain. Their dependence disgusts you. Their uncertainty irritates you. Their desire for reassurance feels intolerable. This may not mean you secretly possess the identical motive, and it should never be used as a universal accusation, but the intensity can invite a question. What becomes dangerous if this quality is also human in me? That question changes everything, because ownership is not enactment. Admitting, "I want reassurance," does not require demanding that another person provide it. Recognizing jealousy does not authorize surveillance or punishment. Naming possessiveness does not justify control. Feeling resentment does not make cruelty inevitable. An impulse brought into awareness can be examined, spoken responsibly, limited, and chosen around. An impulse denied must find some indirect way to govern. The durable audience interest in shadow-oriented material establishes only that this struggle remains recognizable. It does not validate any specific interpretation, excuse harmful conduct, or permit you to announce hidden motives in someone else. The lens is useful when it increases humility and responsibility, not certainty about other people. And here the healed identity meets its crisis. To become more whole, You may have to risk becoming morally ordinary in your own eyes, capable of need, contradiction, envy, dependence, confusion, and wrongness. Not ruled by these qualities, not ashamed into denying them, conscious of them. Because what you can own, you can choose how to carry. What you refuse to own will keep choosing through you, and nowhere will that difference become clearer than in sustained closeness with another imperfect person. Private reflection can reveal what you carry, but closeness reveals what carries you. Alone, you control the pace. You can stop when shame rises, arrange the meaning, choose which details belong in the account. Another person introduces something private understanding cannot provide, a consciousness beyond your control, with memories, limits, and pain that may not confirm the person you believe yourself to be. Then, the decisive sentence arrives, "You hurt me." Shame surges before thought has finished forming. The healed persona reaches for its familiar instruments. An explanation appears, then a limit, then a diagnosis of the other person's reaction, perhaps a larger spiritual meaning that makes the conflict seem already resolved. Within seconds, the old sequence is prepared to repeat. Activation becomes defense becomes distance, and distance becomes evidence that the relationship itself was the problem. But this is the threshold where integration becomes visible. The task is not to become impossible to trigger, it is to notice the defense before granting it authority. 5 movements can change what happens next. First, remain present when presence is safe. You do not have to feel calm. You have to resist making discomfort the sole decision-maker. Second, name the impulse without assigning responsibility for it. Part of me wants to leave, not, you are making me shut down. Third, acknowledge the concrete impact. What did you do, and what did it leave the other person carrying? Fourth, apologize without using intention, history, or fear to cancel the apology. Fifth, propose a change that can be observed rather than admired. In plain language, it may sound like this. Part of me wants to explain this away. I can see that I withdrew when you needed an answer. I am sorry. Next time I will tell you I need 20 minutes and return when I say I will. Nothing in this response requires self-erasure. Repair is not compelled agreement. You can understand the impact of your behavior without accepting every interpretation of your motives. You can correct an accusation, decline a demand, or end an unsafe exchange while still acknowledging valid harm. Consent remains. Discernment remains. What disappears is the assumption that disagreement makes responsibility unnecessary. And one honest response, however moving, is not yet transformation. The measure is repetition over time. Do you return when you said you would? Do you become less punishing when afraid? Do your apologies require less caretaking from the person you harmed? Does your next choice carry evidence that the previous conversation mattered? The intensity of remorse can feel profound. The elegance of insight can sound profound. Follow-through is what makes either one relationally real. Not every relationship should continue. Integration may lead to reconnection, a relationship with different terms, or a respectful ending. It does not demand reconciliation where safety or consent is absent, but neither does it permit disappearance to be disguised as wisdom. Even an ending can contain truth, proportion, and responsibility. Healing becomes visible when activation no longer decides the entire relationship, and the practical question now is how to make that freedom increasingly available without turning it into one more identity you must perform. You do not need another explanation that makes you feel advanced. You need a way to translate what you already know into choices that can be felt by another human being. Embodiment begins there, not in the brilliance of the interpretation, but in the smallest action that makes presence, protection, or responsibility real. The first discipline is to pause before interpretation. Notice the tightening in your body, the urgency to answer, the certainty rehearsing its case, the impulse to leave. These signals do not prove that you are wrong, nor do they prove that danger is absent. They tell you that activation has begun shaping meaning. Give yourself enough time to distinguish what is happening from what fear predicts is happening. Second, translate vocabulary into human speech. Beneath the polished label, find one present feeling, one concrete observation, and one honest need or fear. You are violating my boundary may need to become, I am overwhelmed and I need 10 minutes before I can listen well. Plain speech feels riskier because it reveals experience without placing you above it. Yet that simplicity gives the other person something they can understand and respond to. Third, examine the function of the boundary. What action remains under your control? What danger, dignity, or value are you protecting? Does the limit preserve safety while leaving room for relevant truth, or does it require the other person's reality to disappear? A proportionate boundary can stop contact, restrict access, or end participation. It does not owe unsafe access to anyone, but when safety permits, it can protect you without making protection dependent on permanent innocence. Fourth, practice repair before the rupture becomes dramatic. Correct the dismissive tone. Admit that you avoided the question. Return when you said you would. Ask what might help restore trust, instead of waiting until accumulated injury demands a grand reckoning. Small repair trains the capacities that crisis will later require. It teaches the body that responsibility can be survived without collapse, and that imperfection need not become abandonment. Fifth, measure the pattern across time. Is conflict becoming less punitive? Are apologies carrying fewer qualifications? Are requests clearer? Are commitments more reliable? Do not measure yourself by how deeply you understand the pattern on a peaceful day. Measure what becomes possible when the old reaction is available and you choose differently, even imperfectly. Therapy can become a laboratory for this work, not a credential proving completion. Bring in the embarrassing moment, the failed apology, the superior judgment, the limit that may have concealed a defense. Bring what threatens the image of being a good therapy client. The material you most want to edit may be the material through which knowledge becomes practice. But do not turn these disciplines into a new system of self-surveillance. Integration is not a persona that never reacts. It is a widening interval in which reaction can be felt, examined, repaired, and gradually reorganized. Some days that interval will be generous. Some days it will last only long enough to prevent one unnecessary wound. That still matters. Choose one safe, proportionate interaction now. Replace one polished explanation with one plain admission and one observable next action. Be discerning about where you become vulnerable. Repair cannot force reconciliation, and no practice requires returning to abuse, surrendering consent, or abandoning necessary protection. Presence, plain speech, proportionate protection, repair, follow through. These are not signs that you have finally become healed. They are how healing becomes available in life and how the need to appear healed begins to loosen. The final defense is not the wound itself. It is the need to be known as someone who has moved beyond it. You may still understand every pattern, recognize every trigger, and name every limit. But now that knowledge has a different purpose. It does not help you escape the encounter. It helps you enter it with greater consciousness. This is the transformation the healed persona could never perform. Explanation becomes responsibility when it keeps inquiry open. A boundary remains protection when it preserves agency without demanding immunity from truth. Spiritual meaning becomes participation when it allows grief, anger, and shame to be lived before they are interpreted. Shadow becomes choice when the forbidden quality can be admitted without being obeyed. An apology becomes repair when later behavior proves that the injury mattered. None of this delivers the final state you may once have imagined. Need will not disappear. Anger will still arrive. Shame may still narrow your vision. Contradictions will expose themselves, and old defenses may return with astonishing speed. Wholeness does not make you untouched. It makes you increasingly able to notice what has touched you without surrendering every choice to it. The identity shift is quieter than the performance that preceded it. You are no longer the person who must prove completion. You become the person willing to be affected without collapsing, accountable without becoming worthless, protective without becoming unreachable, and unfinished without turning that condition into failure. From the outside, this growth may look almost unimpressive. Fewer diagnoses, fewer declarations about what you have transcended, more direct admissions, more conversations, resumed after a pause. More behavior revised because someone's pain was allowed to matter. More limits that are clear, trustworthy, and proportionate. Less brilliance in describing the wound, more freedom in what happens when it is activated. That is honest participation, not perfection, not passivity, not permanent openness, but conscious involvement in a life that will continue to expose what remains incomplete. You do not abandon insight, boundaries, spirituality, or difficult emotion. You stop using them to secure an identity that cannot tolerate being human. If this reflects a choice you are ready to make, you may comment, "I do not need to appear healed. I am willing to be honest, repair, and change." If you want to continue, explore the related material on shadow integration or relational repair. And let the final answer be quiet. The wound stops governing the identity when it no longer has to hide behind the image of having been transcended.